Yeah, welcome back. So today our job is now to derive the equivalent torque speed characteristic of the induction machine. So let's take this important task now. What we had come to, to recap, what we had come to the conclusion was that an induction motor can be thought of as a generalized transformer. The geometry of the induction motor, three-phase induction motor, is very different from the geometry of a three-phase transformer. But both sides, there is a three-phase primary, there is a three-phase secondary coils, and in the in the transformer, however, the construction, whether it is core type or shell type, is such that there is no rotational movement possible. But here we take advantage of the spatially distributing it. So the transformers are more look like concentrated windings. There is no spatial distribution effect that we discussed there. But here we distribute the windings spatially. You recall this figure that I had earlier. We spread them spatially, and then when we excite three-phase currents through them, I am right now talking of stator, then we get a rotating mmf wave, a rotating mmf wave rotating at the frequency omega of the supply. Now, you could also probably increase the number of poles effectively, and I have discussed that kind of a theory also earlier, that you could, wherein p by 2 omega m is equal to omega s, where p is the number of pole pairs. All that is also feasible to do all that kind of stuff, but we will keep throughout our discussion right now simple to a two pole kind of construction, two pole on the rotor, two pole on the stator. That's what we will keep it simple and just talk in terms of uh, electrical radiance. So the stator creates a sinusoidal mmf which is rotating at omega s. As it sweeps, this rotor, how do I show the sweeping of a rotor? Tough to show a sweeping of a rotor, but as it sweeps, imagine this, that as it sweeps the rotor, there are three-phase windings on the rotor, and effective number of turns are n1 is to n2. I will call it effective because it's not just plain n1 and n2. There is a factor which will have to be accounted for due to the distributed nature of the winding, but that's a secondary aspect. So I have been postponing that discussion and focusing more on the important essential facts. But you have n1 effective is to n2 effective, let's call it. And based upon this, now this rotating mmf created from the stator is going to is going to cause a rate of change of flux, which itself is sinusoidal in nature, because sines and cosines, when you differentiate, they again become sines and cosines. And that rate of change of flux linkage is going to induce the EMF in the secondary windings. And then what are we doing? I said, basic induction motor, we short circuit the rotor winding. So there is no supply connected to the rotor. Rotor construction is very simple. You just have bars like this and a cage rotor like this, and you just short circuit them. So if you short circuit R, short circuit Y, and short circuit B, then you can just put all of them together and short circuit it. There is no need to keep that separate distinction, though for analysis we still need it, and this becomes a cage rotor. You could also induce, connect through slip rings, a secondary side, maintain three separate phase motors, and induce, connect it to a supply of some different frequency or same frequency. And that if you do, you can get more speed, you can get more possibilities in the speed torque characteristics of the induction motor. But in the first course, we don't want to get into all that double cage fed induction motor and all those kind of things. We don't want to, we don't want to get into it. We simply stick to the fact that we have on the secondary a cage rotor which is short circuited, and inside of it here is a iron mass. I'm sorry, inside of it, uh, inside of it here is a iron mass, here is an iron mass, here is a air gap. Now, then we basically came to the conclusion that once the primary induces a voltage in the secondary of the secondary winding, it is effectively a mutual induction which works like a transformer. So we said that we can calculate, we can have, motivates us to think about the induction machine as a generalized transformer. But because now we have taken advantage of the geometry of the rotating, we have constructed a rotor kind of a geometry, a circular kind of a geometry, a cylindrical rotor kind of a geometry. And since the rotor is not, you are not holding on to the rotor, you are letting the rotor rotate, you are giving that freedom which you didn't give in a three-phase static machine of transformer. You didn't give that freedom. Now since you have given the freedom for it to rotate, so what will happen is the uh, once the current starts flowing in the rotor windings, then by the principle of BIL, they interact and create a torque, and the rotor starts chasing, rotating, chasing the rotating MMF produced by the stator. So this I said is basically the basic rotational, wherever we deal with the rotational motion, if you write the law of motion for there, the Newton's law, then in this case the rotor omega is taken to be in the direction of TE, and TL is the load, is the load torque is what you want to drive. And so it could be an inertial one also, it doesn't matter, but right now I am assuming that there is some TL which we want to drive. And so the tau L, or tau L that we want to drive, so the net torque acting on the shaft or the rotor mass becomes Te minus TL, and that should be equal to moment of inertia J times the rate of change of angular velocity d omega by dt. Now if the machine is unloaded, we started our discussion with an unloaded machine. If the machine is unloaded, then TL will be 0. So for steady state, TE should also come out to be 0. So if the TE also has to come out to be 0, then there should not be any rate of change of flux happening in with the rotor winding. And if there is not to be any rate of change happening with the rotor winding, then the machine should speed up to the rotor should speed up to the synchronous speed omega s, and when it speeds up to that omega s principle, this is the torque speed characteristic that I am going to derive today. This torque speed characteristic that I am going to derive today, this uh, uh, you will get an operating point which is shown here. The machine will pick up to the synchronous speed, and the torque, electrical torque which is created by the machine will be 0. So at least one point we have located. And at the starting there is some positive torque which is created, which is what is going to cause the machine to rotate and thereby come to this speed, and when the electrical torque becomes 0. Now the trajectory as its speed changes is going, that it is going to take is going to be something like this, but this needs to be derived. Right now on this 2 points we have fixed, and you can very intuitively also figure out that there will be a maximum electrical torque that only that machine can produce. It cannot produce an infinite electrical torque. So in fact there would be some third point sitting here. So these 3 points, if you locate here, then intuitively you will be able to think that okay, this is going to be a smooth curve should be there, and this is what the smooth curve is there. But we will derive it, don't worry about it. The point which I was trying to make is that the machine will now speed up to synchronous speed. Now, if I connect some load here, which is less than the maximum permissible, torque that this machine can produce, then then what is going to happen? For example, suppose you have a three-phase small induction motor and you connect earth to it, to its rotor shaft. Will it ever rotate? It will not rotate because it cannot create a torque which can rotate, drive a rotation of the earth. No such thing we will be ever able to devise. So every machine will have some fixed capability. So long as this TL is less than that TE max, so long as that TL is less than or TE max, we should be in a position to take advantage of this equation and drive uh, uh, drive it. But there are many more things to this statement that I am trying to say. And the journey of dynamics, I don't want to get into straight away. The journey of the how to do this we will come to later after we have derived the torque speed characteristic. So let's, for the sake of simple discussion, say that a small torque is connected uh, uh, to the rotor shaft. The small torque is going to be such. How is that small torque going to be such that it is less than this particular starting torque value so that it can start rotating. Otherwise, in principle, it can start rotating in the opposite direction also. Like for example, in a lift, if you don't keep something to hold it on to a standstill, it can even fall down, right? I mean, everything has to be balanced properly and all that. Again, diversion. Let's not divert. What I am trying to say is, suppose we give a small torque here, so that a small torque value, so that it is less than this thing, so the machine can start speeding up and start rotating. Then what is going to happen is that the d omega by dt will become positive, the machine will start rotating. Now the machine cannot go to synchronous speed. If machine goes to synchronous speed, what happens? T becomes zero, so the TL will, minus of TL will be impacted on it, and so the machine will start deaccelerating. So there is no possibility that it can rotate at synchronous speed. But it can have a steady state speed. So the moment you connect, assume that you have brought, for the sake of simplicity, machine to a synchronous speed, and now you connected some small load to it. The moment you connected small load to it, it will start deaccelerating, and therefore on the speed line its direction will become like this. When it starts deaccelerating, then immediately there is a rate of change of frequency. The rotor sees a sweeping three-phase rotational mmf at the speed at the speed s times of omega s. That means, suppose the rotor slips back by a fraction s, then the rotor speed will be written as omega m into 1 minus s omega s. This is what is going to be the rotor speed. And so the stator mmf is rotating at omega s, the rotor is rotating at 1 minus of s times of omega s. So the rotor windings see a rotating mmf wave sweeping it at speed s omega s. If this is the speed at which they see a rotating mmf wave which is sweeping them, then emf will be induced in, then their perception is that I am seeing bm cos of theta minus omega s of t. This is what I am seeing. Now when they see this happening, when they see this happening, bm cos of theta minus omega s of t, and this bm is same as that of the one created by stator. So far I have not let any current discussed to the point where currents are flowing in the rotor. So when they see this frequency rotating mmf wave, then immediately they can deduce that, because the rotor you can calculate the flux which is associated with the rotor winding in the exactly same way as I did for the stator, and come to the conclusion that they will see a sinusoidal or a cosinusoidal flux changing through the winding at slip frequency, that is s omega s, and therefore a rate of change of induced EMF is going to happen here also. I'll just keep a factor k here to say that effective number of turns has to be applied here, and this means I will see a sinusoidal voltage, which means I can have a phasor representation for them by saying that E is equal to phi into e to the power uh, uh, actually j omega. I can just write this as um, I think I can just j s omega s. I can just, this is a better way of writing it. I can write it as j s of omega s. So d by dt, d operator has been replaced by the p operator, as it is called, is been replaced by j times, where j is square root of minus 1 into the omega operator, which is slip frequency times the omega s. So now this is what using transformer kind of notation. So this voltage is basically at standstill, it is going to be phi r j omega s. Now it is s times of phi r j omega s. So therefore, if this is written as j phi r j omega s is written as E2, then at slip frequency, which is the standstill voltage induced at standstill, then now the voltage which is going to be induced is SE2, and since the rotor is seeing alternating phenomena at s omega s, so the reactance of it will be L2 times, this is the leakage reactance, L2 times s omega s, which is to be added with plus j being being a magnetic circuit, and then R2 is the resistance. So the impedance of the rotor circuit becomes R2 plus j s omega s L2, and therefore the current which is going to flow through the rotor, which is short circuited, is going to be I2 into S2 divided by R2 plus JS omega L2. Now what is the frequency of this current? This current is at frequency S omega S. S omega S is the frequency of the current in the rotor. But when this will be translated to the stator, it will be at omega S. We'll see that, we have discussed it. We'll revise that thing once again. So now I can divide this, I can bring this S down so that I can write it as I2 is equal to E2 divided by R2 by S plus J times of XL2. Now, as I said, this is a generalized transformer. As I said earlier that this is a generalized transformer. So what happens is the moment current starts sweeping, but still we need to discuss the mechanics through rotation in this particular case, in the generalized case. So the three-phase currents that are going to be induced in the rotor will create a rotating MMF wave at frequency s omega s relative to the rotor, but the rotor is rotating at 1 minus s omega s, and the induced superimposition on it is of the rotating sweeping MMF wave of rotor of s omega s. So therefore, finally, looking from the stator side, you will see a sweeping wave still at frequency omega s. So the rotor currents will create a sweeping MMF wave at frequency omega f, and this in turn will cause a rate of change of voltage. This will rate of change of flux in the stator at frequency omega s. In turn, they will create currents in it at frequency of omega s, and basically that n1 I1 minus n2 I2 is equal to the 0, or the phi times of r if the r is reluctance is taken to be finite. So that equation will come into play. We will just play as if it's an ideal one. So then the currents reflected currents on the primary will be governed by N1 effective is I1 is equal to N2 effective I2. So these currents will be superimposed over the magnetizing current. So that current can therefore be written as that current can therefore be written as E2 dash divided by R2 dash by S plus JXL2 dash. Everything dash means referred to the primary, and when they are referred to the primary, the currents are now again at fundamental frequency, and our equivalent circuit of the transformer is still applicable, but per phase basis, but with resistance replaced by R2 dash by S, where S is the slip associated with the rotation. So the rotational aspect has indeed come into the equivalent circuit. And now what we are going to do is to develop the torque speed characteristic. We are going to treat this part of it as the load part, this part of it as the source part, and replace this with a, if the voltage, first open circuit it here, measure the voltage here, open circuit voltage, call this as V Thevenin, then short circuit this here, calculate the effective impedance here, that is the R Thevenin plus X Thevenin, and then V Thevenin, a voltage source in series with R Thevenin and JX Thevenin, becomes the equivalent circuit of this part is there, to which we are connecting JXL2 dash and a load of R2 dash by S, a load of R2 dash by S plus JXL2 dash. Now our analysis of this circuit is, we have, what we need to study is how does this circuit behave in terms of this current I2 dash which is going through it as the S varies, then what is the power which is lost in this resistor, and then once we get a handle on power, and we already have a handle on speed, that omega m is equal to 1 minus S times of omega S through the slip, then we will be able to say that power is equal to torque into speed. So from there we will get a handle on the torque, and once we get a handle on the torque, we would have practically moved significant many steps ahead. So this VThevenin, if this number is much larger, or rather this number is much smaller than this number, then VThevenin can be approximated by the source voltage V1 itself. But for the time being, I am going to be exact here and write it as VThevenin. So then when the, see, approximations you should do when you need it and you can justify them. So that's the idea. At some point of time, we will have to resort to approximations, but we will be able to justify them as well. All right. Now this I2 dash, the current which is flowing through this, is going to be V Thevenin divided by R Thevenin plus R2 dash by X. This is the net resistance of this circuit, and the net reactance of this circuit is JX Thevenin plus JX L2 dash, and so this is the ampere current which will flow through this. So then the power which is going to be, see, the inductances don't lose, dissipate any power. This equivalent resistance here R2 dash by S is the one which can dissipate power. Though it appears to be a heat here, it is not exactly heat here, because it is R2 dash by S and not just R2 dash. So it has two components which it is dissipating. One is the mechanical work done, which on this equivalent circuit also looks like a heating loss in this R2 dash by S, and second is the actual heating loss, which is happening in that in the resistance which is there on the secondary circuit. So the power which is dissipated in this R2 dash is the square of the magnitude of the current I2 dash into R2 dash by S, which can be written as, I'm sorry, I have used this should be V Thevenin square. So mod of, if one wants to be very safe, one should write like this. So the power loss is going to be the square of this voltage divided by the sum of squares of this into I2 into R2 dash by S. Now what is the heat loss in the rotor? I just said that the heat loss in the rotor, and these circuits are per phase, so I have written per phase here, is I2 dash square into R2 dash, and and the power which is transferred to the rotor, which has two components, the heat loss in the rotor and the mechanical power which is created, the work done, the mechanical power which is rotational power which is created out of it. So this transferred power I2 dash transferred power to the rotor is equal to the heat loss component and the mechanical one. So if you subtract that, this is the transferred power to the rotor minus the loss component, then you will get the rotational power or the mechanical power which is created. And so take I2 dash R2 dash I2 dash square R2 dash as common, and then 1 by the in the bracket you will get 1 by s minus 1, which can be written as 1 by s. But then this one here, I2 dash square R2 dash by s, this is also the power which is transferred to the rotor. So the power transferred to the rotor multiplied by 1 minus s is the power which is used for mechanical work done. And now, if you look at the fact that in steady state the rotor was rotating at omega m, which is 1 minus s omega s, then basically the 1 minus s pr divided by 1 minus s omega s is the so 1 minus s will cancel out, and pr by s pr by omega s will become the the torque which is being produced on the rotor with a factor of 3, because the rotor is reacting to all the three phases, because all the three phases are mounted on the rotor. So therefore you will get, if this is per phase basis, then 3 times of this is the net pm which is going through it, to which it is responding at the speed 3 pm is what is it going, to which it is responding to the speed omega m. So the 1 minus s factor cancelled out, and then you got this. And now just substitute for the power which is transferred to the rotor, which is what, I2 dash square R2 dash by s. So V Thevenin square by so again 1 minute. So V Thevenin square by omega s R2 dash by s divided by R1, or rather I should again call this as R Thevenin plus x R2 dash by s whole square plus x Thevenin plus xl2 whole square. And this is what is the torque speed. Now we have got a thing which is, everything here depends upon the parameter of the on the parameters, electrical parameters of the machine, except the slip. So as you keep changing slip, you can calculate the three phase power, and hence in principle you will now brute force also be able to uh, draw this characteristic. Now the next question is, what is this maximum torque? What is this Tmax which is going to happen? So to answer this question, which is very very important and interesting question, because that's what the maximum amount of torque that a motor can drive, to find the Tmax, what should we do? This is a function of s. So therefore at the maximum the gradient has to be 0, the rate of change of torque with respect to the slip should be 0. So this is how we are going to calculate the this is how we are going to calculate our maximum torque which is going to happen. So let's do that thing here, but I am going to use a more subtler way of maximum power transfer theorem, but let's do it. what I am going to do is, this slip is what is going to change here. As the slip changes, R2 dash by S changes. So, what I am going to call this R2 dash by S as RL, instead of that something again divided by S and all that. I'll just call it as RL and ask this question, that at what value of RL does the derivative of the electrical torque with respect to this load resistance become zero. Once I get that, the maximum, the resistance value at which maximum power transfer will happen in this circuit, then from there R2 dash by RL will give me the corresponding slip. I will call it as S max. It's not the maximum slip, it is that slip at which maximum torque will be developed in the electrical torque will be developed in the machine. So now we'll this is so this equation will now simplify to, see, the 3 omega by omega s V Thevenin square is a constant, so we don't have to worry about it. R2 by S, R2 dash by S, I am writing it as RL. So this equation is, numerator has practically RL divided by R Thevenin plus RL whole square plus X Thevenin plus X2 dash whole square. So call that numerator RL as F function, the denominator sum of the square of the impedances as G function, and if you look at the derivative of F by G, then you know that it is F dash G minus G dash F divided by G square, and since we are setting this derivative to 0, so therefore all we need to write is F dash G minus G dash F should be equal to 0. So what is the F dash is just RL, so F is just RL, and we are taking derivative also with respect to RL, so the F dash is just 1. So F dash times of G means, just plug in the denominator here, minus F times G dash, so F becomes just the RL, and takes this derivative with RL here, so this term will not play any role into it, and this term will become 2 times of R Thevenin plus RL into derivative of RL with RL, which is unity. So the chain rule will give you this should be set to 0. But then now you can easily check here, this nothing subtracts out of this, and this is R Thevenin plus RL, and R Thevenin plus RL can be taken common here. Then the remaining term will be R Thevenin plus RL minus 2 times of RL, which is R Thevenin minus RL. So therefore this term becomes R Thevenin plus RL into R Thevenin minus RL plus of X Thevenin plus X2 dash whole square, which if you write this as R Thevenin square minus RL square, and then take that minus RL square on the right hand side as plus RL square, then you get R Thevenin square plus X Thevenin plus X2 dash whole square equal to RL square, or RL therefore becomes square root of this, the square root of this, and that is, but RL is nothing but R2 dash by S max, where S max is that frequency at which maximum torque happens. It's not the maximum slip, it is the frequency at which maximum T max happens. So the S max can be now written as R2 dash divided by R Thevenin square plus X Thevenin plus X2 dash whole square. So the maximum slip at which S max is given as this, and it only depends upon the equivalent circuit parameters which are under the control of designer. Now once we have got the S max, we can calculate. We have to substitute that X max in this equation here. We have to substitute that S max in this equation here and calculate the T max. And when we calculate that T max, I will leave this. Okay, I have done it here. We substitute that S max. I'll leave this. You go through this couple of these steps here. Then you will see that this T max comes out to be half of, again I'm sorry here, this should be, all of this should be V Thevenin, V Thevenin, V Thevenin, VThevenin, yeah. So then all of, and whenever I say VThevenin square, actually I am meaning this that is there. So then the T max will come out to be half of 3 square of the magnitude of the Thevenin's voltage divided by omega s into 1 by R Thevenin plus this impedance Z which is added here. So now look at dimensionally, just once check. V Thevenin square by effectively a R is what? A power, which is when divided by omega s. What does it become? Torque, which is the unit is Newton meter. So dimensionally all of this thing is correct, and there is a factor of half which you should carefully look into. Now I'm going to develop a simpler, I'm going to develop a very simpler expression for the, this all looks very messy. I agree with you, but no, I will show you a very nice simple expression of the torque in terms of Tmax that we can write. And this one is very straightforward. This one you can easily remember. It's half of 3V Thevenin square by omega s. And if you are not doing an exact calculation, sometimes you can write V Thevenin itself as V1 square, and then this one is R Thevenin plus under root of R Thevenin square plus Xm plus XL2 whole square. So now let's call this factor X Thevenin plus XL2 by R Thevenin as a Q factor. This Q factor you would come across in circuit analysis terms. I will not get into it right now, but let's just call this factor as a factor Q. This is on this factor Q. Once you use that, then S max can be written as R2 dash divided by this. But then for this I am going to substitute Q times of R Thevenin. This is Q times of R Thevenin. So then this will become this square is uh, this square is left out here. So now the plus has to be. So then R Thevenin can be taken out common here. So it becomes R2 dash divided by R Thevenin into under root of 1 plus Q square, and uh, and uh, this is what uh, S max turns out to be. But what did I do here? 1 minute. What is my S max? Um, yeah, yeah, this is what it is. Now what you can say, suppose this Q, see, usually the resistances are small and inductances are large. So at fundamental frequency, reactances are large. So assume for the time being that this Q is very large, not infinity, but tending towards infinity, very large, much larger than 1. Then I can then I can forget this 1 here. I can approximate 1 plus q square by q square, and therefore I will get this term as r2 dash by r Thevenin times of q is equal to S max, or r2 dash by r Thevenin can be approximated by S max times of q. That's the point that I am trying to say. Okay. Now let's look at the T max. Now doing this substitution here, R Thevenin is taken out as common, then this will become 1 plus Q square. So 1 plus Q square, and then a whole R Thevenin can be taken out common. So this will become uh, half of 3 1 V Thevenin square. Now let's, since we are going to be in approximate domain, I'll write here first as this as V Thevenin square divided by omega s into 1 by R Thevenin into 1 divided by 1 plus Q square, which now I will approximate this by V1 square, half of omega s, R Thevenin and R Thevenin. Now 1 plus Q square can be approximated by Q square, taking under root it becomes Q, and then 1 plus Q can again be approximated by just a Q. So therefore the T max Tmax can be approximated by half of 3v1 square by omega s 1 by r Thevenin into 1 by q. So calculate the q factor, calculate the r Thevenin, and here you get the Tmax square. Now what is the actual torque equation? And all of this you should do it yourself, because this, once you do it yourself you will get it. If you just listen to me, you get to know it, you still don't really learn it. Okay, so the T is now given by 3v Thevenin square by omega s r2 dash by s into this equation that we have. And again we are going to play the same trick here. Write this as q square r Thevenin square. Then we are going to take the r Thevenin common out. So we take the r Thevenin common out. So actually when you take r Thevenin common out, it comes as 1 by r Thevenin square. So I am keeping 1 by 1 r Thevenin here, and pushing 1 r Thevenin on the numerator by writing r2 dash as 1 by r2 dash by r Thevenin, and then separating this term 1 by s here. And for r2 dash by r Thevenin, if you recall, I had already written it everything in terms of the q factor. This is S max times of q. So I make those substitutions here. Please go through these calculations carefully. I'll leave you the notes with you. And then this will become 3v Thevenin square by omega s r Thevenin, etc. You work it out here. This will simplify to 3v1 square by omega s r Thevenin into S max by s into q plus S max square by s square q square plus q square. So now one set of q will cancel. So therefore you will get this term here as 3v1 square by omega s r Thevenin times of q sitting here. Now on the numerator here you will have S max by s divided by S max square by s square plus 1. So take this as a common factor and cancel it out from numerator and denominator. So then this term will become S max by s, and since a 1 was sitting here, a reciprocal term will have to be written, which is s by s max. And therefore but this term is what? 3v Thevenin square or v1 square by omega s into 1 by r Thevenin times of q. This is half of this is actually the T max. So therefore this is 2 times of T max, and this whole equation is therefore 2 times of T max into 1 by s max plus s max by s. So if you now take the torque divided by tau max, this is a per unit expression, both of them being in Newton meter, the resultant is normalized to the maximum torque, and this is a per unit equation. S is also a per unit dimensionless quantity. So therefore this becomes equal to 2 divided by s max plus s max by 2. So now with this simplified expression, very quickly you can draw you can very quickly understand this. Suppose that slip is very small. The slip is very small, then this number will dominate this number. So therefore this number can be ignored, and approximately you can write this as 2 divided by s max by s. So the s goes out, and this becomes equal to tau by tau max. So as the slip increases, the tau increases, which is the condition which happens here, until somewhere it will not be a straight line up to this, but first it will be almost like a straight line, and then it will tilt towards the T max and hit the T max here. On the other hand, now let's start from this end. When the slip is small, when the slip is close to 1, for example, when the slip is large, then this this term is comparatively less. So you will get 2 s max by s, which means a reciprocal nature of torque with respect to the slip. So you will get a reciprocal nature curve, and somewhere they have to meet nicely, and get a torque speed characteristic like this. Now this part here is your, from here to here, this part is your motor characteristic. Now suppose you increase, suppose you could connect, you like for example in a wind farm, the rotor of an induction machine is connected to those blades that you see of the big blades or that you see of the wind farm, and the they rotate it, they rotate the rotor, and therefore the rotor, when it rotates at a speed higher than the synchronous speed, then the which is slip which is s minus omega m, slip which is s is omega s minus omega m by omega s. So if the omega m becomes greater than omega s, the slip becomes negative. So the torque will become negative. The torque here will immediately become negative, and torque becoming negative becomes a generator action. So it becomes a generator kind of action, not kind of action, it becomes an induction generator now. And if you extend, you will get a characteristic which looks similar to this. So just connecting it to the rotor to actually a rotating mass and driving that rotating mass at a speed higher than the synchronous speed will cause the mechanical energy from the rotor to be transferred as electrical energy into the stator, and therefore this here onwards you will get a generator, the generate, you will get a generator action somewhere here. And if you rotate the rotor in opposite direction, this is where the rotor is being rotated in opposite direction, then the slip will become omega s minus omega m by omega s will become greater than that, the slip will become greater than 1, and uh, the slip will become greater than 1, and it here the slip is 1, here the slip is 0, here the slip is negative, and here the slip is greater than 1. Then what happens? It's a braking action. That means suppose you are going down the hill with an electrical vehicle which is based upon an induction machine. For example, a railway train which is coming down a ghat section is uh, down the incline. So what you do is you just flip the phases and create the rotating MMF to be in the opposite direction to the actual rotation which is going downhill. Then again it is works like a brake, and and the T the this expression will tell you, I leave it to you to think a bit more carefully about it, how this works out like a brake, but you can even create a regenerative braking action out of this particular thing. So I think with this we will take a break here now. Thank you.